Okay, so now that we are a few minutes in, and hopefully everyone has had a chance to join the meeting, I'd like to welcome you to the first meeting of the Interlibrary Loan Task Force, and just introduce myself as Jennifer Brooke, and I work at the Bethlehem Area Public Library. And during the last user group board meeting, I volunteered to help the task force get started. And I would like to start the meeting with an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. And please also let us know which library you work at. Anyone like to go first?
Hi, this is Mary Beth Long. I work at York County Libraries.
And I'm Susan Bowman. I also work at York County Libraries in the ILL department.
I'm Marie Crispino, Scranton Public Library.
I'm Tessa Mitchell from the Scranton Public Library.
Tina Thomas from the Scranton Public Library and the president of the users group.
Elizabeth Davis, Scranton Public Library.
I'm Victoria Stacknick. I'm from the Easton Area Public Library.
I'm Carrie Cleary, available as your Executive Director of PAILS, Pennsylvania Integrated Library System.
I'm Ian Shen with Parkland Community Library. We have a small group here.
Hey guys, this is Angie. I'm over at Emmaus Public Library. I do ILS and circulation.
This is Lee Jean Shelley from Spark.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
Valerie Mann is here with Jennifer Brooke, Bethlehem Area Public Library, Interlibrary Loan Group.
Okay. So to get things started, I'd also like to ask for a volunteer to take notes. I know that I have a Word document open here, but when leading the group, it can be very chaotic. And I also think that the minutes are very valuable to people who are not able to join the group due to scheduling issues if the minutes come from a viewpoint of someone who isn't going crazy trying to arrange the meeting. Any volunteers? Okay, so if there are no other volunteers to take meeting minutes, then Valerie Mann here with me did volunteer to take meeting minutes. So she will take the notes. Okay, so basically one of my first points to raise in this meeting is that there was some discussion in the user group as to whether or not the interlibrary loan group needs to be a task force, which is temporary, or a committee, which is long-term. And the way to determine that, I feel like, is to determine what your goals are and why you were interested in a meeting of minds with other interlibrary loan professionals in the first place. So does anyone have any thoughts to this concept?
This is Marie Crispino from Scranton Public Library. Interlibrary loan is going to be going on forever, so I wonder that it shouldn't be a committee and not a task force.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts? Okay. So I'll voice one of the thoughts that went on during, I think, the user group meeting of the board was that while interlibrary loan, as Mary pointed out, does go on forever, in some ways it's not undergoing constant change. And one of the things that might happen over time is that we might kind of lose momentum and things to discuss or to fix. So a task force would exist long enough to achieve all of our goals, to fix any issues, to obviously one of the things that we're looking for is to get documentation and best practices in place with Spark community, and perhaps establish some manner of handling any issues that come up. But after that, the task force might dissolve, or a committee might, in the case of, say, the other committees, they meet at least 4 times a year, hopefully, and hopefully we have something to talk about, that sort of thing. So of course, none of this is set in stone. We're still feeling things out. So and just keep this in mind. Okay. So why don't we talk about your goals for the task force / committee and why you were interested?
I would like to see like what other, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I like to see what other libraries do when there is library loan, how like their books come in out, like how fast, or what is their priorities in ILL, what goes out first, what the workflow.
Well, this is Valerie at Bethlehem, and I can speak to that a bit. We have a very strong ILL staff of 3 right now, so we basically try to keep things very balanced. Our patrons versus the incoming requests from other libraries, we try to make sure that everybody's getting, a balanced treatment. So we are pretty fast at getting things out. Although we say 2 to 6 weeks turnaround, it's more often than not 2 weeks. And we do also provide a rush service that allows for an extra fee that you would jump to the front of our line and would process your ILL immediately.
It's of interest to me, this is Marie from Scranton Public, it's of interest to me in terms of where do we go in terms of the Commonwealth Libraries Interlibrary Loan Code and Guidelines. How is this resource sharing? Is there going to be a difference in what we do as to that code and those guidelines? And I think that is something that the committee will need to deal with. And as my feeling is, as we go forward with the increase in technology and different libraries coming on board, I just think we need to have a real discussion on just where we are with the code and the guidelines. And that's another strong point in terms of having a committee and not a task force.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you, Marie. You do bring up a very good point in that I think it should be one of the goals of this group to define the difference between an interlibrary loan and a resource share, and also to define how those items are treated in Spark, or at least the best practice for it, because some libraries get very interesting if we start specifying what they should and shouldn't do. But we do need to remember that because we are on a shared system, everything that we do, no matter how tangentially, we do affect each other. And so how we treat another library's item that they lend to us when it's an interlibrary loan to us does affect that lending library, and it can disrupt workflow. It can disrupt statistics depending on its treatment. So we need to define, perhaps what our goals are as far as tracking our interlibrary loans, because I know that several libraries, Bethlehem included, uses both OCLC and SHAREit. So we don't really use OCLC and SHAREit as a whole to track where our interlibrary loans are and when they're due to various libraries, because it doesn't have a maintainable workflow. So instead, we use the Evergreen ILS to do that, and so that's why we check out the items that we lend to other libraries to an actual account that we create for that library. And then a lot of the workflow associated with that is automated. There's overdue notices that go to that library, and we also receive a notification that it's gone overdue, bill notices when the item needs to be charged because it's damaged or it never comes back. That is also automated. When we step outside of that, there's a lot more, hands-on workflow that has to be done. And, as great as our 3 people are here, it can be certainly disruptive to the workflow that we have in place. Anyone else?
Jennifer, this is Mary Beth. We also use OCLC and SHAREit, and we have a similar workflow that you do, that we do check out materials when we are lending them to an account and SHAREit to that library, so that we also can track where they are. And our workflow is when we have incoming books from other libraries, we tried checking them out. Scott had recommended before that we check them out directly with the barcode that was on the item, and that interfered with the item that was checked out to us because it was already checked out. So we went back to putting an interlibrary loan, an ILL in front of the barcode, and then we use that barcode. And that seems to have alleviated that problem, that we can then check out the books that are lent to us, to our members, using that ILL in front of the barcode.
So you're creating a pre-cat with the barcode, yes, but you're prefixing it rather with interlibrary, with ILL, so that it doesn't create a barcode collision.
Correct.
Okay.
And just to be sure that I completely understand, this is Valerie. Are you saying that to do that, how are you literally creating that pre-cat? Are you using a separate? You tell me how you are literally creating.
Once you type ILL into the barcode field and scan that barcode in there, that automatically creates the pop-up.
Are you able to see my screen yet? You're able to see my account Evergreen? Okay, so what's happening there is that before you scan the barcode, you're just typing in interlibrary loan, ILL, and then you're scanning the barcode, and that should create the pre-cat screen that comes up here, where you enter a title, you enter an author, any other info that you want listed with it.
Yes, we enter different information other than just the title. We put ILL and a slash in front of the title, and that keeps our circulation desks from automatically renewing those items at the desk if somebody were to call in, because they know that that needs special attention then.
Right.
They need to contact the interlibrary loan department. And we put the lending library in the author field, and then we put the actual SHAREit number or the OCLC number in the ISBN field, and then we use the ILL modifier for the circulation modifier.
Okay.
The big thing about that is remember to change the due date.
Right. Yeah.
We do ours a little different. We do I create like a short record because we do the automated like call or email. So we create like a short record for the book, and we like check it in, and then it'll pop up for patrons saying it has a hold on it. We usually do the title, the author, and then for the barcode, we have our little own barcode for each book. And then for the call number, we do, is it access or OCLC dash with the number. And then that's how our system tracks the item. So always on a patron's account. So we have to worry about it be misplaced. So that's how we do it here. And then once it comes back, it's checked in and it's routed down to ILL.
Okay, thank you. Here at Bethlehem, we do something else as well. I'll let Valerie explain that.
Well, we have barcodes that we simply use in the pre-cat situation. We create unique barcodes for every item, and we find it very easy to do. We, when they come back to us, we recycle them. We simply delete the record that is on the item record. But before I even talk to that, I want to be again clear. When we check out I think again we're already getting ahead of ourselves, in my opinion, because we're coming down again to ILL versus resource sharing. So when we check out our items, any one of you, we simply have created our record, and then we check out our item out to you. And your account is set up so that it reflects that you are an interlibrary loan participant, and therefore you are not able to renew your items on your own. So when we, however, create, our problem has to do with when our items are received by the other libraries. So I just want to be clear what we're talking about. Are we talking about these?
Currently, we're talking about the process for creating a pre-cat record.
Okay, but in what context? As
when
the
you
receiver?
are the receiver.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that if anyone was lost. Okay. So I think one of the good things that this conversation has led to is that there are several different practices when creating a pre-cat record as to the type of information that you put in and all of that sort of info. And I have to ask, who has a CIRC modifier of interlibrary loan besides Bethlehem? Here at Bethlehem, we have a CIRC modifier of interlibrary loan. It doesn't allow any renewals. It does have a set number of days for the checkout, but during the checkout process, we usually set the due date before we scan it, so it takes care of it on that scale. And that is usually the CIRC modifier that we use. And the reason that we do that is so that when we run a report on our overall CIRC statistics, it's very simple to filter out our interlibrary loan statistics.
Jennifer?
Yep.
The ILL CIRC modifier is consortium-wide, so everyone should have it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else ever use it?
York does.
Okay. My guess is that anyone who doesn't use it would be using a CIRC modifier appropriate to the item that they're checking out.
We use it at Easton, and we also have a very similar workflow to Bethlehem as far as using the pre-cat with Easton barcodes unique to each item as they come in, and then recycle those barcodes.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a very long time. It's just a whole bunch of barcodes, like thousands, in these bins that are on index cards, and we just use them over and over, and once they've been returned to us, we delete the pre-cat and it's ready to use again. It's a simple and familiar way of doing things, but we're open to hearing other workflows as well. And so I think that's one thing that should definitely be shared with the group, is everyone's methodology for what info they put into the pre-cat record and what circ modifiers are used, so that we can work together to come up with documentation and best practices for the Spark community. Because certainly one of the things that we experienced when we transitioned on, and probably several other libraries did as well, is that when you transition on to Spark, there is a real lack of documentation and recommended practices for the Spark community. And hopefully that's one of the things that this group will accomplish, is that we will put together a set of best practices that seem to work across the board.
Can I, this is Elizabeth. I have a question, and this kind of goes back to our defining, oh, okay, we have that, okay. I wanted to make sure like what the interest and goals were, and I think when you kind of write out your methodology for how you go about your ILL practices, perhaps each library can kind of write those up as like a general workflow, and then define, okay, if it is a true, well, not true, because pretty much everything is an ILL. If it's a resource sharing item, your workflow with that, and then if it's an OCL or share it, your workflow with that. Would that help everyone? Just to kind of compare?
Yeah, that's something that we're all, I think, looking for. Is I think when I originally sent out the invitation, I did ask for any sort of documentation you have regarding interlibrary loans, and I got a couple of responses, a couple in the last 24 hours, so I haven't had a chance to look over them. But then the goal of that gathering that documentation is to help us, understand what everyone is doing, and we're hopefully going to post those onto our, our Spark Community Knowledge Book, so that everyone can see them. And then at some point, we would like to have just a general set of documentation and best practices for new libraries that migrate on, so that they have kind of a boilerplate to work with and build on. So Carrie will be posting the documentation that I did receive in the last 24 hours to our interlibrary loan source book. If no one has, if no one remembers that, let's see here.
Yes, I was just going to ask, is there a way to access this source book, or what's the information to access it, I guess?
The SparkPA.helpspot.com. Carrie, is this the correct one, or is this the old one? I know that you were transitioning it.
That link at sparkpa.helpspot.com is the current link. The old link also still has a referrer that will get you there. So either way works. This is the new link. We're actually working on making sure it's all one, but for right now, both links work. So sparkpa.helpspot.com. What I will do is, as we collect this documentation and Jennifer sends and shares it with me, I will create a separate knowledge book that we will call ILL and put all of the documentation collected under this task force into one knowledge book for easy access for everyone.
Yeah, you can see that the knowledge books here on the left-hand side. There's one for support, cataloging, circulation, reports, etc. Some are more fleshed out than others, and And of course, currently there isn't really one for interlibrary loan. There's a forum for resource sharing. Again, the forums are not very active, but I think that if you want to post a question there, we can start getting active on that to talk about things outside of our email if you're sometimes tired of getting emails every day.
And Jennifer, if you refresh the screen now, I believe I have added a knowledge book for ILL already.
Yay, right there at the top. So Carrie is going to post the interlibrary loan documentation that she's already received, and certainly if you have any that you'd like to submit to the group, and she is happy to post it so that we can continue getting together some documentation, just kind of as the whole, on a whole, so that when new libraries first come onto Spark, they have some idea of what to expect, something to start with. Okay. All right, so it's currently right at the top, but Carrie says that it's probably gonna, shift down in that list, which is okay. Okay. So let's see. What were we last talking about? Are there any topics that anyone would like to shift to, since I have forgotten?
When do you want to address certain problems we have when PreCat unique records are not utilized?
Okay.
Or do we want to wait till everybody puts forth their workflow, and then maybe we'll all be able to be more articulate at that point?
Okay. So has anyone experienced, besides Bethlehem, when we experience disruption in interlibrary loan, we remember it very clearly. Has anyone else experienced any disruption in interlibrary loan workflows when they, after they migrated on to Spark? Perhaps it would help if we define what that disruption was. So several times, other libraries received our item that we lent to them, and they treated it, the best way to say it is that they treated it like a resource share. And some we talked to, and they, were fine with our, please don't do that conversation, and others not so much. And so, of course, what happened is that they checked our item out to that library's patron. And so it dropped out of interlibrary loans practice of keeping track of it here on the lender side. And that disruption can always be fun. Okay, so thank you, Rhonda, for letting us know that you've experienced that. Thank you, Jamie. We did also put interlibrary loan on hold for a month or so while we migrated on to Spark. Number one was that we needed to figure out a different way of tracking our statistics. And the other issue that we ran into after the migration onto Spark was barcode collisions for quite a few of our items resulted in having barcode collisions with PreCat records that already existed on Spark from other libraries who had received those items as interlibrary loans in the past. And it was fine for them because they were able to scan our barcode and create a PreCat without any issue because we weren't on Spark yet. But once we migrated onto Spark, our items, because of that barcode collision with that old pre-CAT record, and some of them were like, 5 years old, we had to recatalog our items. So we found that the barcode collisions from the initial migration was very challenging because it was hundreds of items. Okay, thank you, Sarah. So here we have an example of someone who is specifically told not to use pre-CAT checkouts for items that already had SPART records. Now, my question to you about that is that in the Lehigh Carbon Consortium, you're a consortium of 11 libraries. So that's certainly true because you're actually resource sharing. But is that also true of items that you receive through interlibrary loan? Did they specifically say for interlibrary loans, or were they talking about the items that you were resource sharing with other libraries inside of your 11 library consortium?
Hey, Jennifer, it's Lou Jean. Can you quickly define the difference between resource sharing and ILL?
That's one of the things that hopefully we can define better. But an interlibrary loan, to my understanding, is an interlibrary loan that you receive from another library and you requested it, let's say, through SHAREit or OCLC. Does that fit?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, all interlibrary loan is a form of resource sharing, but not all resource sharing is interlibrary loan. Allentown, Easton, and Bethlehem are a consortium, so we can borrow interchangeably, and it works very neatly when we do so. But yeah, anyway, there you go.
Okay, so
I think it's important to note as well that the definition of interlibrary loan for statewide statistics collection does include those resource shares also as interlibrary loans. So although we may locally talk about things as an ILL, it could be an in-state ILL through Access PA, an out-of-state ILL through OCLC. It may be that you have resource sharing agreements at either a county, a district, or a system level. And then you have maybe you have other partnerships with a local college that may be a local resource share. But under the state definition, when you are counting interlibrary loans, it's important to have clarity on that statistic for reporting purposes as well. I think we all have different processes for the sorts of arrangements we have through the system that we are using. And this group can talk about how Spark, how our instance of Evergreen is used as a best practice for each of those types of loans. First, we also need to define it also as those that your location is the lender for, as well as the process for those where your location is the borrower. So that's why this is a very complex discussion, and I love that we're starting it out by getting some definitions and a shared understanding, because it can start to get very complicated very quickly.
Okay. It's good, I think, to go back to this. I agree. Because in the case of Sarah with the Lehigh Carbon Consortium, according to these definitions that we have temporarily in place here, items that are requested, let's say, through the Evergreen ILS and are shared between those 11 libraries in the Lehigh Carbon Consortium are considered resource shares if we go with this definition, and anything else that is requested outside of that is considered an interlibrary loan. Okay, thank you, Sarah. so that's interesting that you're also treating interlibrary loans. This is where I think that some libraries have run into challenges in the past where items that they sent out as an interlibrary loan were, let's say, treated like a resource share by the receiving library. And I think that's where we sometimes ran into issues because the results, the impacts of such treatments are hard to define, they're hard to explain, and I think we don't have the right people talking to each other. And that's what this group is hopefully going to change, is that we have the right people talking to each other honestly about our workflows and our impacts on each other. Go ahead, Valerie.
I just want to mention that I believe one of the primary problems that we were experiencing was due to the fact that when, with the libraries that we have had communication issues, shall we say, when they have received our item, they have actually checked it in their system, and then they have proceeded to take our item and check it out to their patron, which means we lose track of it. And my understanding is we do our updates in SHAREit and in OCLC, but we don't, and that's where we go for our tracking. And my understanding was some of these other libraries expect us to go into Spark for tracking. I may be mistaken about that, but that certainly then would be another piece for us to consider as we approach and modify our workflow. I don't know if Jennifer can make more sense out of that.
I'm remembering that incident. A major part of that incident was that during the time that the item was checked in by that other library and before it was checked out to the other patron, which was a series of a couple of days because they notified the patron to come pick it up and they didn't check it out to the patron until they came and picked it up. Patrons were looking for that item here. And so we were going crazy down at the reference desk and on circulation trying to find this item that wasn't even here. And it wasn't until we talked to interlibrary loan about the issue that they said, oh, that might be an interlibrary loan. That sounds familiar because they had just handled it recently. But it was just by chance that that conversation happened because we don't necessarily always talk about items that just go missing on the shelves. I mean, that happens quite a bit. So that was just an accidental connection that happened. But it's just an example of kind of the chaos and disruption that can happen, not just, to interlibrary loan staff, but also to patrons who are expected to trust our OPAC when it says that an item is available and it turns out that it really isn't, and they lose trust not just in that OPAC but also in us and we lose trust in it a little bit as well.
Do you think that when it's the ILL that the lending library put a little note on the paperwork that's in it, please do not check in or check out using barcode? Maybe that'll help when it's the ILL, because it probably won't happen all the time, but as the ILL, maybe they could put that little note in there so the lending, the borrowing library won't do that. It'll help.
Very possibly. Another thing that I'd like to propose, and I've talked about this with someone else, is a Spark, like a book strap. Does anyone currently in the group have a book strap for your interlibrary loans? When you send it out, you put the strap on it and it says various things. Okay, thank you, Angie. Okay, so that's Emmaus has a book strap for their interlibrary loans, and I'm not suggesting anything fancy. I know that there are places. We receive interlibrary loans for, Lafayette and their fancy plastic things with Velcro and fancy printing, and we drool over them. But so I was thinking maybe we could make a book strap for Spark libraries that kind of show, number one, it's an advertising thing to show libraries that aren't part of Spark that, this is, happening. And also to discuss perhaps how to most ideally treat an interlibrary loan that has been received by a Spark library, from a Spark library, if that makes any sense. Okay, so there's a lot of chat conversation going on here. So several libraries do have book straps and several do not. As to Sarah, I guess you're only in chat. You're not able to talk over the phone right now. So I think I would like to get back to you about the, or if anyone has any suggestions about how to handle their situation where they were instructed specifically to not use pre-CATs for their interlibrary loans for Spark items. It's a tricky situation, and we need to figure out how to address that further.
If I may, I was just wondering, just maybe as a little bit of a clarification, who in that system, in the Lehigh community system, decided not to use, or decided to use the items with the Spark, within the Spark system as a barcode? Because I know that there was some issue with the Evergreen team telling people just to do that without an understanding of how the interlibrary loan system was working within Pennsylvania through Share It or our consortiums. So I was just wondering if it was made as part of your district decision, or if it was the like Evergreen team just saying, yeah, just do this, it's fine, without consideration of how we actually have workflows between our different libraries.
This is Ian over at Parkland. We're also a part of LCLC. We don't recall ever getting that note, so we have been doing things with pre-CAT records. We put a strap on our book that has one of our barcodes on it and do a pre-CAT checkout. So that way it also helps when the books come back in, our circulation staff knows that it's an ILL and it can be routed accordingly, and then the record can be removed at the time of check-in. So not to add another wrench to it, but we're in LCLC and we're doing the pre-CAT records.
Okay.
This is Jen at Lower Macungie. Sorry, we're also part of the same thing, and I also don't recall ever being told that, but we do just use the barcode that's on it and create a pre-CAT when necessary.
Hi there, this is Carrie from Pales, and Scott had told me some of the things that he had thought it was a good recommendation. Since I have come on and have learned many of the complications with barcode collisions and situations where I have watched workflows and begun to learn the many different ways, that's one of the reasons this very task force is formed, so that we can work to address these issues. I believe that there are good reasons why in some cases using the barcode on the item can be very effective, but that in many cases it does wreak havoc throughout the rest of the system. So I'm thankful that you're all here today so we can have this discussion. I believe that nothing that comes out of today's meeting means you must make an immediate change to practices that you have been doing and that you believe were right all along. Seriously, there's no need to rush out. Nothing emergency is happening from this meeting. But I am excited that we begin this discussion. I've seen a lot of great workflows and samples where people have reusable barcodes and great methods. So if we talk about best practices and at the same time talk about parts of a practice that may harm another workflow, that's a good way to keep this conversation going and flowing with a plan for the future to be able to implement best practices.
Thank you, Carrie. So I think this is a good example of, you know, talking honestly about some of the challenges that we have encountered, you know, when migrating onto Spark that weren't necessarily created by our own behavior or by any recommendations that were given to us. So it's something that it's good for us to all talk honestly about, you know, why we're running into these issues and how to address it. And Carrie is right that it doesn't mean that anybody has to necessarily change their workflow if they don't have the resources in place to change them or if they feel the need to. So it's more that we're just helping each other figure out how to address our issues, and that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone on the other end has to change. It's more about how we address our issues internally as well. And again, you know, also to perhaps deal with a little bit of communication issue that's happening, because I do see, you know, several differences in the recommendations and conversations that were had between a set of libraries that migrated on all within the same time frame, within a year of each other. And it sounds like, you know, we just don't have the documentation and, you know, supporting best practices to support these conversations that are happening kind of on the fly during a migration process, that lets new libraries know what to do when they're migrating on, in order to create the best experience for everyone, including themselves. So that's one of the things that hopefully this group will accomplish, is that we can, again, it really is documentation, not just for us, but also for the people who are training new libraries as they come in, because it's very possible that, you know, our training experiences, because we're starting to help, you know, libraries that have been on here for a while are helping libraries that are coming on. And so our experiences can start coloring the training and advice that we give to those libraries. And we want to avoid that by having a best scenario example for them to follow in the future. Okay, so do you think that we have adequately defined the difference between an interlibrary loan and a resource share?
Jennifer, going back to the interlibrary loan versus resource share, it sounds like a lot of issues are coming about because Spark libraries are ILLing from other Spark libraries and treating it like a resource share. Wouldn't this instead be a good opportunity to maybe talk about opening up resource sharing on a wider level to the consortium? Because, I mean, the functionality is there for them to treat these books, you know, just check them out to the patrons. And I know a couple different library systems have already started resource sharing in that way. And it's something that I think a lot of people can definitely see the entire Spark consortium going towards in the future. So maybe since this is happening, would this be a good discussion to have?
So just to comment on that, one of the things that kept us from joining Spark sooner was the lack of structure behind this concept of resource sharing. Because right now it is literally a concept. There is no shared, documented understanding of how we treat each other's items besides just a be nice. And that was one of the things that kept us from joining Spark years ago. And so when we joined Spark in the last couple of years, it wasn't just because of the long-term goal of resource sharing. It was because we wanted to also be involved in the community and to save a budget line, of course. But that's one of the things that I think it's a chicken or egg scenario. Which comes first, the resource sharing or the guidelines behind it? And there are also several other things to consider. How do you track those statistics then? How do you count those those circulations? Do you count them as part of your regular circulation statistics? Because all of this resource sharing concept is outside of the interlibrary loan code, and that is the structure that we are currently relying on for interlibrary loan, is that code and how the statistics are supposed to be treated and that sort of thing according to the state report. And it's just none of those similar things have been defined for resource sharing. So, you know, at a smaller level, such as between Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, we made an agreement between ourselves on how to count our statistics. We made an agreement between ourselves on to have similar fines and similar checkout links and things like that. It was several years worth of negotiations to make that happen. And it was probably very similar for other consortiums that started out from the get-go resource sharing on a smaller level than at the Spark level. And I think there's a reason that this changeover from the interlibrary loan practice to the resource sharing hasn't happened sooner. I think it's making people nervous. Does anyone feel that way besides me? I'm sorry if I took over there.
This is Tina. As being on the committee for the resource sharing group and Lackawanna, Allentown, or Blair County and Cambria County resource sharing, we do have a structure set up. So there is, you know, we do get statistics and we do have things that were worked out, you know, during our process, and we even did a trial version and then we went on to a full-fledged version. I think a lot of things that are getting confused is the difference between Spark level resource sharing, which is the part between Blair County, Lackawanna, and Cambria, versus your, for example, the Lehigh Carbon doing their resource sharing. I think there's a difference between that, and I think that's what's causing the confusion.
Yes, we do have several different levels of, we have the Spark level resource sharing, which is anybody can join into that, and then we have the smaller.
There are 3 libraries that are part of the resource sharing. That's Lackawanna, Cambria, and Blair County.
Mm-hmm. Right, but if, say, another library expressed interest, they would be able to join, correct?
They would have to, it would have to be brought to the resource sharing committee.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I suppose it's a conversation to go back to what was asked of why do some libraries not decide to do resource sharing on the larger scale versus interlibrary loan? Is that the question? Go ahead, Valerie.
Yeah, I just, you know, something has occurred to me in this discussion. It's going to seem so obvious to some of you, I am sure, but is it that, you know, yes, I do think that there is confusion for the reasons that have been stated, absolutely. And I'm thinking that ultimately, and ultimately, I mean, is it as simple, you know, we're creating these new barcodes for Spark libraries, but is it, are we ultimately trying to function with, you know, in Spark at large as the individual consortiums do? In other words, instead of checking out the Baffle book to York. Should we put it on hold for York or on reserve for York and send it to York? And then York checks it out on our barcode. But then, you know, that's ultimately where we want to go, something like that, isn't it? And and are we getting all confused here because of so many different individual and unique definitions?
I think definitely, yes.
Hi, this is Vicki from Cambria County. I'm sorry if this was answered already. I kind of jumped in a little late, but we resource share from Cambria County, our library, Blair and Lackawanna, and it seems so much easier and so much less paperwork and documentation than having to do an interlibrary loan. So are there other counties that share within each other, or do other libraries only share within their district and we're the only ones who share outside of our county?
I think it's a mix. Within our district, we share our own, you know, items like that, kind of, but then not all of the libraries in our district are on Spark. So it's kind of like both concepts have to be in existence in some ways, because there's just a mix of so much going on. But perhaps what we need to think about is, do we want the Evergreen ILS and the resource sharing method to eventually replace ShareIt? Because ShareIt right now is a separate ILS that has all of our items loaded onto it. Every library in the state, Spark and non-Spark, and we're using that system to reserve items and then to check them out in some ways to each other. Now, that behavior is being used for libraries that are not resource sharing, so to speak, but they are interlibrary loaning with each other. That framework is what continues to be in existence. The concept of resource sharing in the long term, say every library in the state got on to Evergreen, perhaps Evergreen and that method would replace the ShareIt process at some point in the future. But where exactly that changeover happens is hard to define, because it's very hard for us to be able to tell very easily, you know, who is on Spark and who is not. I mean, yes, we have a list and all of that, but there's nothing designating that we're a Spark library, so to speak, in Spark, for example. No, in ShareIt rather, sorry. So we, in our case, if it's not at Allentown and Easton for our patrons, then we go to OCLC or ShareIt. But you're always going to have interlibrary loans, you know, for things that are outside of the state for the libraries who continue to use OCLC.
With the things with the ILL and like the barcode collision and everything like that, would it be best for anyone that comes onto Spark to let them know not to use the barcodes on the book? Like anybody joining Spark, say, please don't use those of you doing ILL, like the ILL librarian know, since they're coming onto Spark?
I
or no?
think that is a recommendation that we should put forward as a best practice to any new library joining Spark to avoid doing that. Yes.
I'd like to say we could say, like, at least in the interim, do not do that. Perhaps in the future, we would move towards that.
If you move in the direction of resource sharing, where there is an understanding between those two libraries that you're not using ShareIt to track or to request an interlibrary loan, perhaps.
Well, is the reason that we would not have libraries make requests through the Spark systems, member Spark libraries, to just use Spark? I mean, and I think the question, in my view, would be to make sure that we're collecting statistics as we need to. But I guess what I'm thinking, are we just overthinking this? And it's, I mean, it can't be as simple as, Parkland just puts a hold on one of our items, and the interlibrary loan department, or perhaps circulation, then just hands it over to the ILL department to get it there. I mean, do you even, I'm not making sense again, is that?
That means that you would use the traditional interlibrary loan delivery system for it, because we don't have a delivery system between
the traditional interlibrary loan delivery system, but the barcode collision issues would be resolved, wouldn't they?
Because we would be treating interlibrary loans as resource sharers from the beginning, perhaps. So Carrie asked, do all of our libraries search Spark before we go to share it when we're looking for items for our patrons, or do we just go to share it?
Yeah.
At Easton, I only search within the Easton, Allentown, Bethlehem consortium before I go to share it or OCLC.
Likewise in Bethlehem.
Okay, so there's a mix.
Practice as well.
What did York say?
That they search within the York County and then share it. Okay, so there's a mix of people who keep it within their library or their consortium, and then after that they go to share it, and there are others that search all of Spark. And so I guess, one of the other questions to consider is, we have two separate ILS systems running that could potentially handle the same process. And that is that ShareIt is a fully capable ILS system, and we're just using one part of it to do our interlibrary loans. There is I don't know if I want to go in this direction, but I'll put it out there and it's your choice. There is kind of like a module or a supplement to Evergreen called Fulfillment, and it is designed specifically to assist with the workflow of interlibrary loans. I don't know much about it, but perhaps it's something that we want to investigate to try and encourage Spark libraries to work within the Spark framework for interlibrary loans that we have available between each other. Let's see if I can find it. Probably not on the first try. All right, so Fulfillment joins the basic process of the scalable Evergreen library software with connectors to other integrated library systems, creating a real-time virtual union catalog for library systems or networks implementing Fulfillment. So it's first deployed by Georgia Pines, which is familiar because that's where we got this whole idea for Evergreen. And is anyone else interested in this, or is it barking up the wrong tree? Okay, I'm going to assume that since I'm just hearing crickets, that this is not a direction that we want to go in, but you can certainly, look it up and try and, do some research and come to another decision later. And I'm on a meeting. So is there anything else that we want to cover? We're going into a second hour, and I'm free to do so, but some of you might not be. I think we have a goal for our next meeting that we should get as much documentation together as possible about interlibrary loan and our processes, and start to think about coming up with a simple boilerplate version for new libraries that are coming onto Spark, and also to think about the definition of interlibrary loan and resource share.
There is one thing that I'd like to discuss, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in this meeting, but for myself at the Easton Library, I am interested in the statistics side of the interlibrary loan processes for other libraries. The state statistics was mentioned a lot, and when I came into this position, I was given just a very basic outline of what the statistics that need to be kept are, and then I report those to higher up administration, and I don't really have a hand in reporting them beyond that. So I was wondering if other libraries were interested in sharing what statistics they keep, how they retrieve those statistics. A lot of other libraries mentioned that they use Spark to run reports and things like that. And I was just wondering if that could be covered at some point, just to get an idea of how maybe a better method of collecting statistics for myself, because I know that the system I inherited is pretty outdated. We still use a lot of pencil and paper, like tick marks for things, and it's just not a very efficient system, I don't think. I don't think I'm getting accurate statistics when I do run them. So that's just something that I was interested in talking about at some time.
Okay. I think that's another valid thing, is that we probably have both similar and dissimilar statistical needs with our interlibrary loans. Certainly there's what's required at the state level, but if you're a district library, you might have district statistics that you need to collect, how many interlibrary loans you do on behalf of your district and vice versa, etc. So I think that's another thing that if you feel comfortable doing so, please share it either with Carrie or with myself, and I will share it with Carrie, and we'll post it. Of course, anonymize it however you like, or I can just send it out via a mass email to the interlibrary loan contact list that I have here. So certainly an example of the statistics that you collect, both on perhaps on a monthly basis and also on a yearly basis, because the results might differ a little bit. And just to show you an example of what we do here at Bethlehem, we actually use an external system. We put it in place before we went on to Spark, and we decided to stick with it because we ran into so many disruptions in the beginning of our migration. And so what we do is we have a Google form that we fill out every time we handle an interlibrary loan that is not a resource share. So it's an item that was requested through OCLC or Share It. And so we talk about the format, we talk about who is requesting it, and where it was supplied from. And based on those questions, you go to, different places of the form. And then the resulting output is just this, long list of results. But then I use pivot tables to make sense of all of that data. So I'm able to use pivot tables to count all of the individual transactions. I'm able to count how many come from libraries outside of our district, how many requests come inside the district, how many are for our district patrons versus our individual library patrons, etc. And also by format.
You don't use Share It, Access PA, their statistics in there?
No.
They have in there?
We do, well, we could, but the problem is we also use OCLC. So we would have to combine the numbers for both Share It and OCLC together on top of the statistics that we run for example, our items that we lend to the district libraries. So that's a third place to collect statistics from and add them all together. We decided that just every time we handle an interlibrary loan, we fill out the form, which answers all of these questions for the statistics that we need, and it's all in one place.
We also at Bethlehem, and I also, when I came into the position, had, inherited a system. I, in the beginning, used both, well, back then it was the VDX system and OCLC statistics. The problem we ran into with OCL is that their statistics aren't available till the 10th of the month consistently, and our district librarian needed statistics earlier than that. So that was another reason why we abandoned the external methodology.
And is there anyone else where those two repositories of statistics just aren't cutting it?
That's why I was interested, because I am still counting each individual paper request slip that I have for each item that comes in, or each item that is requested from Easton patrons and district patrons. So at the end of the month, I have two piles where each paper I mark, what type of library, what type of item, that kind of thing. And then I count it by hand for everything. And I've looked at the statistics on Access, and I've looked at the statistics on OCLC. And they don't always match what I have in paper form. So that's why I just don't think that it's the most efficient way to do it is the way that I'm doing it. And I'm just looking to improve that system. So this is interesting for me to see another way to calculate the statistics, also not using the Access or OCLC counters.
Yeah, at first when I proposed the solution to Valerie, we were both concerned that having them fill out this form for every transaction, would, be an undue burden for our staff. But we actually found that as long as we kept the form straightforward and simple, it really did handle itself very nicely. I went through a couple of iterations of the form to get it right, to both collect the data that we needed and also to not have the staff, spending an undue amount of time filling it out for every interlibrary loan. But then because the process of filling out that form and gathering the statistic was spread out over time, that it also helped in that way so that there isn't this monthly scramble at the beginning of the month to count up these statistics because it's already there. You just have to build a pivot table that will take care of itself every month. So, right now, someone in another room could be filling out that form about interlibrary loan statistics, and these numbers will update themselves. I just have to refresh It's just, you know, right now someone might not be doing that, but these numbers, they just build. That's it. I don't have to do anything to get these numbers for interlibrary loan. And so that actually ended up reducing the workflow because she doesn't have to count those little slips of paper anymore. I watched her do that for years and was just like, there's got to be another way. And this seemed to work for us before we went on Spark, and we ended up trusting it more than Spark. And, you know, and SHAREit and OCLC, those systems existed beforehand. And, you know, so we could get the types of statistics from Spark right now about interlibrary loans, but we also have this issue of items that are treated as interlibrary loans, and then you have interlibrary loans that are treated as if you're resource shares. That's where reporting inside Spark becomes very complicated again, because you have to gather those data points in different ways. Again, you're splitting up how you would get those statistics. You would have to run one report to try and figure out your resource shares, and you'd have to run another report to figure out your interlibrary loans. Then you have to add those numbers together, and again, you're ending up doing a whole bunch of math at the beginning of the month. And yeah, we just decided not to go that direction. And Carrie points out that perhaps SHAREit at some point, if we decide to go in this direction of having Evergreen replace SHAREit, that is entirely possible, because every couple of years, you know, HSLC has to, you know, check to see if SHAREit is being cost effective, if it's still meeting the needs of its community. And so they're going to have an RFP for the interlibrary loan software in like another year. So that would be, you know, over the next, you know, in the future, we could eventually ask for this to transition onto Evergreen, and everybody's, you know, for example, all of our items, including non-Spark.
I hate to interrupt here, Jennifer, but I don't see us as replacing SHAREit, but working with and giving feedback and providing input to HSLC. HSLC is also one of our partners that we all work together for success of libraries in the Commonwealth. So I don't envision ever replacing. It could be that our local resource sharing supplements, so we use the SHAREit system less. But until all Pennsylvania libraries, and that would include some of the school libraries we also share with, would be a part of shared Evergreen, I don't envision ever leaving the cooperation that we have with HSLC. What I'm suggesting is that anything we find out, if as we investigate it as a task force, we would like more information from HSLC or to provide some feedback to HSLC, or to work on a separate project that engages with that system, be it SHAREit or whatever new system they may have for interlibrary loans as the future continues. We're always welcome to share questions with them. I would never suggest that we would be replacing SHAREit as a system or replacing the role of HSLC. I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm getting ahead of myself. I do that a lot. Okay. Going back through the chats here, I see someone who would like to, oh yeah. Who is still filling out paper forms for interlibrary loan requests? And Bethlehem is still doing that, sadly. Okay, thank you, Angie. You have transitioned to a Google form and paper. And Cambria County is still doing paper. And Laura McKenzie does paper and online.
We do paper.
York is online.
Ooh, okay.
We do ours here. Our Reader Service does put the ILLs through because the patron, we used to do papers years ago, but we figured since the patron's in front of the person here, they do the request in front of them, or we have the online, they can fill out online. If we have any questions, we'll call them or email them. But we find it much better when we do person standing in front of you, so you get the right book and the right material the patron needs.
That's very true.
That will see that raises a question. Again, and I I don't want to bring this back to Bethlehem, but with when you're a larger district libraries, I find paper very useful. We not all our district libraries are on Spark. We can send out our papers to the districts. They fill them out, then send them in. And it's very easy for us from there to do the request because we can't sit down with each patron at the time. That would be ideal. Patron comes in and it's just part of the reference interview. And if you can't find it here, then you do the ILL on the spot. But not having, not being able to do that, it makes the challenge, I think.
I love Angie's honesty of they have an anti-tech community who hate computers. Let's be honest here. It's not always our decision. So would any libraries be willing to share your link for your online interlibrary loan submission form so that we can all share the experience and see how we're doing things here? I know that several of us are doing Google Forms, which I find very interesting, but I'm sure that there are probably several out there who have their own website facilitate the process. Thank you, Laura McKenzie. Okay, so this is an example of Laura McKenzie's interlibrary loan form. And it, of course, explains, the process, any policies, any charges, due dates, etc., which is good for the patron. And you have a CAPTCHA because, of course, so many of us are getting spammed. So we have someone who uses Weebly. Okay, so the Joseph and Elizabeth Shaw Library. Very simple, clean form.
Send ours in.
And here's Parkland's policies and procedures right there. And you have a Google form just inserted into that. That's good. Yep. And there's York. Wow, that went to it weird. Okay. And that is a really cool graphic, I just want to say. And the usual suspects, name and phone number and card number, locations to pick it up at, etc. Good. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. It's good to see that there is at least, an option between the two. Yeah, and it's certainly good to see examples of other things so that we can see something we like and adapt accordingly. And there's Easton.
And as Jennifer is showing these, and as I am getting the links, I am also putting them on our page in the knowledge book so that you'll be able to refer back to them at any time, guys.
There we go. It's just an email link. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
There's the form.
Yeah, it's just the email link. We haven't updated that yet.
Yeah, we had though.
So yeah, we're in the process of implementing an interlibrary loan form, but it's good to see examples because we haven't figured everything out yet. All right, and it's good to see some examples of policies there where, as Jamie points out, they charge $2 for items that are not picked up. We charge 50 cents regardless of whether or not you receive the item. Well, whether or not you pick up the item, rather. If you don't receive it, if we don't get it in, then yes, you don't get charged. Sorry.
At Scranton, we charge $3 because a couple years ago we had a problem of people not picking their stuff up, so we started charging $3, and it kind of like minimized people from. We let them know like if you don't pick it up, there'll be a $3 fine for not picking up. And I see it has like literally like almost like next to nothing. Maybe every couple of months we get one that didn't pick up, but we usually call the patron and like, all right, I didn't realize it was here, but $3 is what we decided on, and it kind of helped us more our patrons picking up their stuff, letting them know that it is free, but we do the cost is on us, but we're getting this book from another place, sometimes out of state, so we let them know $3 we don't pick up, and it kind of like helped ILL being picked up and people coming for them.
York charges $25 because our previous interlibrary loan manager figured out that that's how much it cost us to do an interlibrary loan. We contact people several times. They're aware of it before they place the item, before we place the request. But that's why we charge $25.
It's a good point. I've heard that number before several years ago as well. I mean, it is expensive for a library to go through all of this effort to do interlibrary loans, and every once in a while you just get that one patron who just ignores every effort you make to contact them about it. They'll assume it'll be there forever, and it's just not the case. Or they're making spurious ones. We had an example of that where they were making interlibrary loan requests just so that they could look at the item for 2 seconds while they had it here in front of the desk, and then they handed it right back to us.
I'll just make a comment on that, Jennifer. We don't really want to judge. If someone just needs to verify that a specific quote is in an item, many researchers do need an interlibrary loan just for a minute to verify their source so they can include it as a part of their bibliography. So I wouldn't want to discount that type of interlibrary loan because it may be how an academic researcher is able to include that reference in their book if they just cite the one quote and then they're done.
Yes, I'm sorry about that, Carrie. I misspoke. In my case, it was they also didn't pick it up.
There you
I
have
think
it. You look at the many reasons why people use interlibrary loan. It's a very interesting discussion in terms of what practices we establish for interlibrary loans. Seeing your charges, I also sometimes wonder, some libraries used to limit format and they wouldn't allow interlibrary loans for music CDs or for DVDs. So it's definitely a library by library choice what your policies are for interlibrary loan. I think it might be best if this task force looks at best practice ideas, particularly those around using the software that is available to us through Evergreen.
Thank you, Carrie.
I was just going to say that, although I'm going backwards now, one problem we were having was with people placing their ILL. We charge 50 cents per item as a processing fee, but people would come in and say, okay, I just want to look this up and not want to pay that 50 cents. That was my experience with the problem. So it wasn't that we were going to charge them $25, but I think that 50 cents was valid. So that's not an Evergreen issue, so I apologize.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing your examples of online interlibrary loan request forms. Just after 11:30, does anyone have any further things to share with the group?
Hey, this is Lou Jean. Can I just add that when you submit your workflows, add a little section of what's troublesome for you. You know, if you're dealing with duplicate barcodes because of the way another library is handling ILLs, just so we can keep track of where the problems are. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, do you think maybe we could have a forum made for interlibrary loan on our HelpSpot page?
I could certainly do that, but I will tell you, I have not seen very many people even willing to use any part of the forums. If you look at the existing forum, go to it right now. I believe if you go to the resource sharing section, or well, I could put a forum in there. I am the last one and the only one who has commented recently on pretty much most of these forums that currently exist. I'm more than happy to put a new forum up here, but I have not seen much discussion on these. Example, in the cataloging one, I'm the only one who's ever made a comment. In circulation, I was the most recent. If people would like a forum for this, I'm happy to put one up. You see now where the new knowledge is. Does this group think they would use a forum if I put it here?
Go ahead and type in your response to the chat box. You can put in your preference, email or forum.
I see Sarah saying she likes to use forums. I'm happy to put one up here. I like forums far better than emails myself, but I'd noticed very little community participation on them. I'll go ahead and throw a forum up here for this, as well as we have the page that I have been putting everything in on.
Great.
Is there a way to post on the forums anonymously?
I do not know. I am not sure. Give it a try. I see lots of people saying they're willing to use forums, so I'm going to go ahead and put a new forum up there for you right now. I am adding a new forum as we speak.
I think there is. I think we can put anything we want in there into the name. Maybe not the email, but you can goof it up however you like.
I have added the forum as we speak. The forum has been added publicly, so you should see it now as a place where you can have a discussion there on the ILL forum. And please, in any of these subject areas, any of you who are interested in using the forums, jump right in and start on the forums. If this group wants to make them active, they will be an excellent use for the group.
And also, everyone who's here, I just want to make sure that everyone who is here and interested is part of my email group that I'm sending out the interlibrary loan emails to. So can you please submit your emails to the chat box so that I can make sure that you're in my group? I know that I have a couple people who said that they were missed. I do also tend to send out the meeting notices via the Spark user group listserv. So if you're not a member of that, you might want to join into that, so that it's kind of a place where we do end up having just email conversations about Evergreen in general. And because you are a user of Evergreen, you should certainly be a part of that group. It doesn't matter what level or department you are. If you're using Evergreen actively in your daily work, you are welcome to be a part of that group on the user group page. And for those of you who need the listserv email, this is the link for the general Spark users group. I'm going to add that to the chat as well. Okay. So is there anything else that the group would like us to talk about today? Okay, I think we're left with a lot of things to think about, and certainly a couple of goals for our next meeting is to have documentation rounded up for everyone to think about our definitions of an interlibrary loan versus a resource share, and to also think about our statistical requirements for our libraries and how can we achieve those in the most efficient and stress-free way possible. And if anyone feels comfortable sharing examples of your statistics, please go ahead and do that with me. And then we can get ready to get that posted onto the Interlibrary Loan Knowledge Book, and we can start getting familiar with other libraries' ways of doing things. Okay. So since no other topics are being brought forward to discuss, I think we'll wrap up the meeting this time for today. And I want to wish everyone a good day, and to let you know that we will be sending out to the group the minutes for the meeting. And is everyone okay with perhaps my sharing the a contact list of everyone who is in this interlibrary loan group? Okay, good.